What's happening, family? And welcome to the season finale of the In the Black of My Mind podcast. I'm your host, Al Thomas, and I'd like to take this time to thank all of the guests for sharing their stories on the podcast. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you all for watching. The second season will begin September 4th, and we want to continue to bring you the great guests and the excellent conversations that we've been having. In the meantime and in between time, tell how many bodies? Everybody's about the podcast, and subscribe on YouTube. Did I mention that it was free 99? It's free, y'all. All free. It don't cost you nothing. So take a chance as you go. It don't cost you nothing. If you like it, come back for more. Yo, do we have to pay for that? There were so many great episodes, I thought I'd do a brief recap and give you a little snippet of them. If you missed any of the episodes, you're going to want to go back and check them out. The first episode is Teddy Collins Sr., who I repeatedly say that his story is a movie. When you came back from Berkshire, where did you go? What was life like?
That was the darkest time, I think, one of the very darkest times of my life. I was angry. I was educated. I had experienced another lifestyle. I had been around money. I'd been around wealth. So, I had this chip on my shoulder. And then I got expelled, I thought, undeservingly. So I was bitter. I was salty. I didn't want to come back to Stanford. I felt like I let my grandparents down and all of the family members that, rooted for me, looking like I was going to make it and not to make it. It's those life lessons are humbling when you're supposed to do something and you don't do it. You fail. So that was a hard time. And plus I was coming back as a father, right. No job, no skills. My grandmother was insistent that I went back to school to at least get a diploma. So I enrolled at West Hill. I must have went to 8 classes in 6 months, and they were only African-American class. I was in an African-American class. That was the only class I showed up for, and I think I was only there 8 times.
Wow.
Only because the teacher, I think, knew my grandmother in some way, so I felt obligated to at least give her some respect. Once a week show up.
Right. Dang.
Yeah, so I came back bitter and salty and got into the dark side. I was angry. I was a militant. I went away to boarding school, Martin Luther King, and came out Malcolm X. So,
Right. Yeah. The next episode is with Ayabaebo Mandingo, whose episode was so deep I had to go underground. Y'all under dig?
So I wrote the 9/11 piece. And backstory to that is a month before that, I was in Mississippi, my first time in the Deep South. And because I'm not from this country, I was blown away. Like in Antigua, you could drive in the Caribbean and you could see the sugar mills that they used to make the sugar that so many of my people died in. And we had sea cotton. Like my mother tells me stories of picking sea cotton as a girl, but not the way you guys had it up here, plantations, right. Acres of it and acres of it. So I remember the first time I went Deep South and I drove and saw cotton in bloom. It blew my mind because it's an instant time machine.
Right.
Same way the sugar mills are in the Caribbean. So going south, the Deep South, and experiencing that was my first time really seeing or feeling the supernatural. And I mean in the way our great grandmother would explain it, not the way not the way Sci-Fi Channel would explain it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
You.
Our juju, and it was on a planet we went to. Well, first we went to Mega Ever's house, and
is that a museum now?
Yeah,
okay.
yes. So and we you know, I don't know if you noticed, but she wrote the poem For My People. She lives across the street from him, diagonally across the street from him. And she's one of my favorite poets, and shame on me for her name jumping out of my head right now. But the poem is an epic poem. It's long, maybe 8-9 minutes to read it, and maybe like 15 stanzas in it. For my people. And she lives, and I saw, you know, Jolivet, the sister that brought us there. We went to Richard Wright's museum before that. Saw a lot of things about, because he's from Jackson, Mississippi. So we're in Jackson, and so we go by down the street, and she goes, yeah, so and so lives there. Her name was just not gonna come in my head right now. Margaret Walker.
Okay.
Margaret Walker. She goes, that's Margaret Walker's house. I'm like, oh, you got to stop the car. That's my poet. She probably wrote For My People in it. That is my poem. So we stopped, and I got one of them cameras. Remember a couple years back, they had the camera, you could turn the screen this way, the video camera, and look at the screen, a big old screen with the camera attached over here. You could spin like that. So I had one of those numbers, and I'm get out the car, and I'm filming. She pulls into this driveway across the street, and I'm so focused on her house that I get out, and I'm not looking at nothing. When I get my load, when I get my fill, then I come back across the street with the camera, and I'm filming them looking at it, and they all taking it in and talking. I was with 2 people from up here, and I host them now, and they're from Jackson. And I go, man, this house looks familiar. Where are we? She said, boy, you in Mega Ever's house. You in as a matter of fact, you standing right where he was standing that night.
Wow.
And brother, I looked down, and what I saw was blood. And Kasim, I put the camera on Kasim, and Kasim is gone. I put the camera on Jade, and Jade, you could see her going. I turned the camera back on myself, and I just started crying, man. Like you know, the kind of cry that no grown man want to do in front of nobody else.
Bruh,
the snot coming.
I got one of them. I'll tell you about it.
And you can't catch your breath, and
right.
And they patting you, trying to get your composure back and man up. They sat me down on the curb outside this man's house for about an hour before I could really gather.
Wow.
And I had requested to be taken to a plantation so I could experience that vibe. So I go to this plantation, and they got the remnants of the house and chain link surrounding it. And there's a big old plaque celebrating, his name was something Walton, and how he had to leave his family to go and defend the South in the war, Civil War, and what a great man he was. And the house, you can see like the remnants are really preserved, so much so that your imagination can fill out the rest of the house. And of course, when you look in the woods, you can see the remnants of the slave quarters too, which they're not going to preserve. They got the woods like taking those back over and hiding it.
Oh, wow.
And I lost my cool, man. So Jolivet, the sister, she's like, brother, please, would you please relax? Since you got down here, your spirit been jumpy, and you please relax. These spirits down here is powerful. I step over the chain link and step into the middle of what would have been the middle of the house, and said, if there are any African spirits still trapped in this place who need a body to escape, take mine and let's leave this godforsaken place.
Oh, Dad.
So now she jumps us in the car. She's like, brother, you crazy. So we shoot back in, and we got to get home before it's dark. So we pull into her driveway. And that morning we had just picked up a brand new Ford Taurus rent-a-car, red, like candy apple, like obnoxiously red. And we get out the car, we go to the back, and brother, their handprints all in mud, like big, you know, that Mississippi thick mud.
Oh yeah.
All over the back of the car, bro.
Really?
Little hands and big hands and woman hands and older looking hands all over the back, and it's mud, and everybody looking at me, and nobody says nothing. And the next morning we go into the school, because we went down to teach and perform. So the next morning we went to the school, and I'm telling the kids about high school, about my experience. One of the young ladies got up and said, well, sir, you know, I'm not surprised, because when that Walton man, when he found out that Lincoln was going to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, he took all the black folks on his plantation to the front of that plantation, and he hung all of them.
Oh, man. Wow. Rather than to let them go. The third episode was with my pastor friend, Jonathan Dubose Jr., who is probably the most humble brother I have ever had the pleasure of being around.
I was playing with Tremaine in Paris, France. And we were playing at the La Méridien nightclub, which is, it's the La Méridien Hotel, but the name of the nightclub was called the Lionel Hampton nightclub.
Oh, wow.
Lionel Hampton nightclub.
Mm-hmm.
And we was playing there, and in walks Harry Connick Jr. and his management. And we played and everything. And so after we finished playing, he walks up to me and he introduces himself this way. He says, your stage presence make up for your lack of playing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so my response to him was, little becomes much when you place it in the master's hand.
Mm-hmm.
He said, where you get that from? I says, all of this is implied by the word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Then we exchanged information. Then 8 months later, he ended up calling, or his management called.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked me if I would be interested.
The next episode is with Glenn Borders. I shared on that episode that he worked with on the David Letterman show for approximately 22 years, and got paid for setting people on fire. Well, he cleared it up and said stuntmen, but I asked him where I could sign up for that.
I used to watch television with my family, and I remember watching the Ed Sullivan show and going, that's a cool job. I want to do that. And then being told, you can't do that. That's over there. You're over here. Well, didn't I work at the Ed Sullivan Theater for 22 years?
Yeah, exactly.
Right where the Ed Sullivan show was shot. I just came here, and I always say, things fall out of the sky into my lap. That gig fell out of the sky into my lap. For 22 years, I worked at the Ed Sullivan Theater. 11 of those years, I was the lone special effects director, but I shared special effects director for 15 of the 22 years that I was there, because I had gotten my certification and whatnot. And there was times when they needed two special effects directors, my boss and me. Before I know it, now all of a sudden I'm in big time television.
Right.
Working for David Letterman. I worked for SNL. I worked for Conan O'Brien. I became everybody's go-to guy for certain effects on Broadway. I wasn't acting as much anymore. I did my show, The Dark Star from Harlem, The Spectacular Rise of Josephine Baker, which I'm pointing to now.
Right.
Which has done well for us. We did that many years ago, and now we just finally brought it back. I finally retired from television, from the union, and did our show. And I guess that kind of brings you up, because now my whole life is about trying to raise money for this show, and writing, trying to get grants to do other things that I want to do. But it's just being in arts is all I really wanted to do.
I know, I'm sure. The next episode is with Kevin Jenkins, bass player du jour. And he's had the pleasure of playing with all kinds of people: Cyndi Lauper, Taylor Dane, Maxwell, on and on and on. Check him out. I know you played with Maxwell at one point.
I did, and I actually did a recording with him too. One time we were in London. It was like in July. I remember it's because I had my birthday when I was out with him, and he actually called me on my birthday. We were in London, and he said, "Yo, man, it's funny. He had a funny voice. Yeah. He sing high, but he talk low. He said, "Yo, man, I need you to come over to the studio real quick." I said, "Like when?" He said, "No, like now. I got something you to play on." So he had me come play on the track. It was like a remix type thing.
Okay.
So it wasn't on it was like a single, like a remix single. But it was fun, and it was on my birthday, so it was a nice birthday present to get a chance to play.
Oh, yeah,
I like playing with Max. So he was like one of the most disciplined people I have ever worked with in my life. I mean,
really?
Our rehearsals, dude, he was like, in rehearsals, he was like relentless. It was like you come in at whatever time. If rehearsal started at 12, you come in at 12. He was there at 11:30. You get in at 12, and if it was over at 5, you might get like a half an hour break for lunch. But the whole time you're there, you're working.
Okay.
And in fact, he had like when we first started rehearsing for the first tour I played with him, he put a hat in the middle of the rehearsal room. He said, "Everybody gonna put $1 in a hat when they make a mistake." So that's true. Because he was like a big James Brown,
Okay, right.
That's because that's what James Brown used to do. And on a gig, he fined you like $25 for a mistake.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
He didn't even play. But that first week of rehearsal, that hat was full of dollars. by the second half of the week by the beginning of the second week, there was no money in that hat.
Oh, I know that's right.
The band was tight.
Taking my money.
Band was tight. I mean, and when he made mistake, he put $1 in there too. If he missed, which was very rare. He might have put in $1.50 the whole time we rehearsed.
Okay.
But he was very disciplined, man. And even sound checks. The sound checks were like an hour and a half long because he was tweaking. He was always tweaking, and he would take she would tape every show and go home and go back to his hotel room. Like everybody else would be out partying. He'd be in his hotel room listening to that show tape over and over and over.
Wow.
Mostly checking to see that his stuff was right. And then he would like tweak. Mostly he would tweak the background vocals. I felt sorry for the background singers because he had them singing something different almost every. Because he would say, "Okay, I want y'all to try this now," and they did. I mean, he was like, "I'm just so diligent and so focused." Of anybody I ever worked with. I mean, I think he's the most focused artist I ever worked with in terms of that presentation and making sure the show was absolutely what he needed.
The next episode featured Dennis Collins, a singer who had the opportunity to sing background behind a whole bunch of people, from Roberta Flack to the boss, Bruce Springsteen, and everybody in between. How did you start singing professionally?
I got to New York. I had a cousin who was a background singer. Her name was Crystal Davis. And I had two cousins, one cousin here in fashion and one in music. So as we would try to, want to come to New York for a visit, I got here. She was singing at the time with Luther Vandross before he became the Luther of Never Too Much. She was in his band. He had a band, a group rather. And being with her and going to a rehearsal with them, I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. I'd never been in a rehearsal studio where you got the mirrors and the band,
Right.
And I'm like, okay, harmony, yeah, I can get into this. And that was my introduction through my cousin Crystal, who was really tight with Luther. And then there was a session that he did. And because I had, been singing in school and knew how to listen to harmonies and stuff, he asked me to sing on the session. So I got to do a recording session at Atlantic Records with my cousin Crystal. Sissy Houston was on it, and another studio singer by the name of Maretha Stewart, who's gone now. And that was my first, I'm like in awe. I'm like, this is the woman who sang with Aretha Franklin.
Wow.
That was, and then that was my love. And I like being in the studio more, making music like that. I like performing. I'm like trying to learn to come out front and, do a little something, but I've loved being just an ensemble background studio singer. It's taken me all over the world.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So where'd you go from there after doing that with Luther?
More sessions came, I met Jocelyn Brown. So there were a couple of clubs, McKell's and 7th Avenue South. So as people needed background singers, I became one of the, background singers with her, and just more sessions and records. And then I met, Onaji Allen Gums. I did some work with him. Like, a lot of jazz artists would do a vocal song. So just going out to McKell's and 7th Avenue South and being in that circle, I got this song. I'd like you to do it for my record. And then that's how it all started.
Wow.
Yeah.
This episode features Daryl Tkes, a keyboard player and vocalist and producer and writer and a little bit of everything. He had so much information, so much history that we had to make his episode 2 parts. So if you haven't seen any of these episodes, you need to go back and check them out.
But I got to tell you something, man. Curtis and I produced something that I wrote in, it might have been 1981 or something like that, but you can look it up. It's because Debbie Allen who is now a legendary person, had just booked her first major role on Broadway, West Side Story. And at the same time, I was just an assertive young brother out there doing my thing. And the ad agency Lockhart and Pettis offered me a chance to compete for a campaign for something called Dark and Lovely hair products.
Oh, yeah.
And so Curtis and I worked together on some things, and I came up with an idea. And the idea was that since Debbie Allen was a dancer, and since she was going to be in West Side Story, my favorite musical, and I also worked with Leonard Bernstein on that, by the way, once in a recording that's easy to find, and a TV show that's easy to find because it was a great performances with Leonard Bernstein, and you can see me on these things. But anyway, the commercial for Dark and Lovely, I wrote it, and I fought the fight to make sure that we could do something a little different. Believe me, like most people, I enjoy dancing. I love dancing. Dancing is everything. I like shaking it, and I like being around folks who are shaking it. However, I said, we got enough of that. Let's do something more elegant for this woman. And I wrote something and got strings on it. And Wynton Marsalis was either a student at Juilliard at the time or just coming out. And the great arranger, Onaje Allen Gums, introduced me. We lost Onaje and his wife during the pandemic. But Onaje is the one who had arranged some Norma Connor's albums and Phyllis Hyman records that are classic. That Betcha by Golly Wow, that's his arrangement. But anyway, all that to say, Onaje contacted a then unknown Wynton Marsalis. So on my Dark and Lovely commercial that I wrote, and I actually arranged the strings on that one, Wynton Marsalis is on horn on that arrangement.
Episode 10 featured Jimmy Locas, who's a choreographer, dancer, a businessman, producer, who's done some really big things. Danced with Janet Jackson, Michael Jackson, Paula Abdul, and is just an all-around great guy. I was telling the wife and Ashley about the podcast so far, and they were bugging out. I was like, oh wow, I can't wait to watch it and stuff. Did you ask Jimmy what it was like to dance with Janet? No, I didn't. So how was it? What was it like to be a part of that?
Oh my gosh, Al. So it was one of the most positive experiences I've really ever had working with the recording artist of her stature. She's kind and sweet and just takes care of her employees just amazingly. When we did Rhythm Nation, what she wanted to portray is like a group of tight friends that were kind of like a positive gang, let's say. Like we were all like more positive. And so in order to do that, that's why we went through all those callbacks and all these things, because they wanted to find out who would be a good fit for her vision. So once auditioning and making it, the first week you still weren't really in, and I didn't know this because we did one day rehearsal, and then the next day I came in and I'm like, where's that girl Stephanie? They're like, man, she's gone. I'm like, oh shoot. So I started working harder and harder.
Right.
And then 2 days later, 2 more people were gone. So at the end of the first week, when we came in that Monday, she sat us down and said, okay, this is my cast. You are the cast and you are good. I'm like, because and I couldn't hate on her for that because she needed to see who was gelling and who wasn't.
Right.
Because this project was so important to her that she may be soft and nice and, pretty and kind, but she's a businesswoman.
Oh, right.
She
right,
knew exactly what she wanted to portray in this project, and nothing was going to stop her with it. So, I mean, all the way down to her cast. But, you know, we would be on set. If certain things on the set weren't right, she would look at it and be like, that's not right. Like, she would fix. She had a clear vision. So working with her was a joy. I've never had so much fun shooting from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in my life. It was like, it was a party. Like, that's what we did with Rhythm Nation, was 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Wow.
And we did that for about, I want to say, a week and a half. And it was like going to a party, you know, but you were working. The music sound systems were like, I mean, everything was dope. You danced your best because of the way it was.
Last but not least is Harold Michael Harvey, former attorney, writer, publisher, keeper of the flame, had all kinds of great information, some great historical facts that I was definitely not privy to. And he was so deep that we had to make his episode 2 parts as well. Question.
Yes, sir.
You had sat down with the Gate City, and you talked to them, and everybody was in favor of doing this pro bono work. How many lawyers actually worked with you?
0.
Wow.
Nobody showed up.
Wow.
Nobody showed up. So I was a lone ranger. It was my idea. Everybody got scared because that was after we made the announcement. The mayor, you know, had several press conferences, and he was very adamant that he was opposed to Freaknik taking place in the city of Atlanta, that his officers were going to execute the law, and if there were violators, they would be arrested. So lawyers are always angling for another job, right?
Right.
Wow. No one wanted to anger the mayor or be on the bad side of the mayor. I mean, for me, it wasn't a political question. It was a moral question. It wasn't right.
Right.
And if the kids came, they needed help.
Right.
And that's what, lawyers are supposed to help. And sometimes you help people out of trouble and you can charge them and you make your living doing it. But at other times you just have to do things for free.
Once again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you all for watching the podcast. The second season is going to start September 4th. So we're looking for you all to come on back and watch these podcasts with us. I'm sure you all seen what's going on with respect to politics. And I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. All I will say is that Black women matter. This has been another episode of In the Black of My Mind podcast. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. Until next week, y'all be blessed.